Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Fix podcast, the Daily Fantasy Sports podcast for Fantasy in Frames Podcast Network. I am your host, Keith Fleming. With me, as always, my good friend, Joe the Brain Matz. Joe, what's going on, buddy?
Not much, just feeling good after my Bulls drafted one of my fellow Wildcats last week in Dalen Terry. So I like the synergy of my teams coming together. If only Arizona football ever had players good enough to make the NFL, maybe my Giants could do the same. How about yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if that would help the Giants any to get Arizona.
No, well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, since we're doing running backs today, Gary Brightwell, the Giants' third-string running back, is in fact an Arizona Wildcat. So he got drafted in I believe, the tail end of the 6th round a year ago. So that tells you about my Wildcat football.
So again, this is the Daily Fix podcast. We will be starting week 1 on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network, doing our daily fantasy podcast each week. For those who have not listened to me and Joe, have been doing this for a few years. We give a high tier, medium tier, and low tier play at each position. We've had some, not toot our own home, but we've had some really good success over the last couple of years, and we hope to continue that now that we're the noobs, the new guys on Fantasy and Frames. But with all the great content that is being put up both on the Fantasy and Frames website, and then also the litany of podcasts that they have, whether it be Dynasty, IDP, Redraft, you name it. We wanted to get into the fun because daily fantasy, there's not a whole lot to do this time of the year. So we've been discussing best ball, which I think I explained it in the article that I wrote a couple of weeks ago, that if you took a class in college and your entire grade was dependent on one paper or one grade, that is what a best ball fantasy football league is, because after the draft, that's it. There's no waiver wires. There's no trades. For anybody leery about the time that it takes to be in a fantasy football league, I highly recommend trying a best ball league, because, again, once the draft's over, the optimal lineup is set by the app or software that you're using. You don't have to do anything. You literally, once the team is drafted, everything is set up for you. We discussed quarterbacks last week. This week, we're going to get into running backs. And Joe, let's start here. That we kind of got into it a little bit. I also got into it again on the article that I wrote on Best Ball on the Fantasy and Frames website. There's a lot of different strategies and thought process to how you do running backs, particularly in a best ball league where, again, it's optimal lineup. Where are you kind of falling that you need to have, the old school model of, running back, or are you thinking more, the new thought by a lot of people of let's wait to take backs, or are you somewhere in the middle?
I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, because I feel like if I'm picking in the, let's say, the top 5, probably, then I think my lean is towards running back. I know, and you went over the dangers, I believe, last week, where you said, what was it, the top 7 running backs?
It was 6 out of the top 7 backs projected did not finish in the top 25 last year in points.
So that's pretty damning. But I mean, if I'm picking number 1, it's Jonathan Taylor, no questions asked.
Yeah,
I think it's foolish to go in another direction, just because when you're really afraid of running backs, I think it should be the running backs who are, they're in that year 5, year 6 territory. Because that's usually when the drop off happens. Jonathan Taylor's year 3.
Doesn't have the injury history, right? Like
no. He's been durable in college, thus far durable in the NFL. But yeah, I think once you get past wherever you stop feeling really confident, which I guess, maybe that's number 2, since Christian McCaffrey is arguably number 2. But I think that the ceiling there, unless you're taking Cooper Kupp, maybe, I think McCaffrey's ceiling is so far above anyone else you could draft. I would still kind of lean towards those very top end running backs. But if you end up in that 8-9 range, that's, if you're in that back half of your draft, I think then I would probably pivot towards more of a zero running back. I'm just going to load up. I'm going to get the best receivers. I might do a Kelsey combo with a top receiver, and then I'm going to get my running backs later. I'm just going to load up because, yeah, I just think you can shoot a lot of darts in that like 40th, 50th, even 50th running back range, and you get enough of those guys, one of them will hit more than likely. And if I can make it again, like tight end, there's only a few great tight ends, so I'd rather be getting one of those top 2 or 3 tight ends in the first or second round than getting, the 8th or 9th running back where I don't feel very confident. Where are you at?
I'm coming around. I told you last week that I'm really digging this no running back, for say the first 6, 7 picks. And when you look at the running backs in the 30 to 50 range, it's kind of shocking. I mean, you see some of these guys, it's especially in the 30 to like 45 range. There's several names that I would not be surprised at the end of the year if they're top 10 or top 15 running backs for the season, whether it be an injury, the right circumstance, whatever it may be. But I'm coming around to where I don't want to take a running back other than Jonathan Taylor in the first 12 picks. And
all right.
It's so risky. You look at the injury factor. I just think receivers and quarterbacks, particularly, which in best ball are huge. It's so much less likely that they're going to get hurt, which is a huge deal. And I would rather wait. Now, I'm not saying, because I really am coming around to, in the second, third round, let's say backs that I really like are there. And you always got to be willing to adjust in the draft.
Absolutely.
To where, you see what's going on. And it's kind of, not to use the NFL draft analogy, but best player available. But I think in a best ball draft more than any other draft, that's a good philosophy, because even if you have a really strong running back, receiving core, whatever it may be, you're going to have the flex positions and it's going to be an optimal lineup. But I do think that trying to load up at receiver, tight end, and quarterback, and then hope you hit home runs with running backs later, I think that's probably more times than not going to be the teams that are going to win the championships, because there's just so much value in running back all over the place. And again, because of injuries, we see it every year where a guy just outplay. I mean, last year, prime example, Joe. Who were we all over pre-draft? Trey Sermon, right? Trey Sermon and the Shanahan offense is going to be incredible. All the buzz, right? Trey Sermon. I know I was all in on him. Well, there was a 49ers rookie running back who was amazing last year. It was not Trey Sermon. It was Elijah Mitchell. And that's just to be, a snapshot of kind of what today's NFL is with running backs, because you don't know. And it's just such a risk. I took Christian McCaffrey. I told you I did my first ever salary cap,
auction
league
draft
last year, auction draft. And I took McCaffrey. He was, I thought, a little undervalued for what he ended up going. When he played, he was phenomenal, but it ended up killing me that I had like $55 of my, $200 roster on a guy that missed, I think, 7, 8 games. And it's just so easy at the running back position to do that. Let's get into the tiers and stuff. We both agree, though, Jonathan Taylor is really, like, on PFF, because we like to go to them. We're stats guys. They actually had tier 1. It was Taylor, McCaffrey, Eckler. I think you could make an argument that Taylor is tier 1, and this is no disrespect to McCaffrey and Eckler, but I think they're just below, and like tier 1, 1B, I guess, is, if you'd say.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Again, when we're looking at how long a guy's been in the league, now granted, Eckler and McCaffrey are not guys who are on like the 1,500 rush threshold, which is generally, that's where PFF actually has found the drop off tends to happen in that range. So the upside to them is they're not there, but they are guys who have been in the league 5 years, and they've both had issues staying healthy. Now Eckler did good. He missed 1 game last year. So that, I think anytime you get 16 out of 17 from a running back, you're happy. But he missed 6 games the year before. Obviously,
right.
Anyone who plays fantasy football or watches regular football is aware of Christian McCaffrey's issues the last couple of years.
Oh, my God.
So, I mean, I get the upside to those guys. They are, my 2 and 3 after him. So I agree with that in general. But yeah, I think just from a health standpoint, durability, there's a 1A, and then the other two guys are in 1B.
One thing I want to clarify real quickly too, and I apologize about this re-listening to our podcast last week. I meant to say that all best ball leagues are either half point or a full point. I believe I said that instead a majority of leagues are a full point. That's not true. Depending on your site, obviously we're big on underdogs. Underdogs are half point. So
we should clarify that, because I talked to you the other day and you said you were doing your list as a full point, and I was doing mine as a half point. So,
which is kind of good though.
Yeah, we've kind of got our bases covered. But yeah, I made sure to check what a underdog was. I was like, since they're our sponsor, I'm going to go ahead and go with whatever they're doing. Also, personal little rant, I think full point is atrocious and terrible. You should not get a full point for catching a screen that goes for 0 yards.
This is coming from two guys that do a DraftKings daily fantasy podcast, and we live off of that, right? Like, we eat because we get these lower priced running backs each week that, I mean, God, some of the guys like James White that we'll use each week because we know you're going to get that 10 to 15 points. But I know what you're saying, and I actually agree, especially as the league has gotten more and more to where I believe the stat was 37 running backs last year averaged almost 4 targets per game. I mean, it's getting to running backs are such a vital part of the passing game. And with them already getting credit, for obviously rushing the ball, and I'm with you. But, it's hard to divide. Let's go through this top 10 real quick from PFF, and then we'll get into ours. They had McCaffrey 2, Eckler 3, Henry 4, Dalvin Cook 5, Najee Harris 6, Joe Mixon 7, DeAndre Swift 8, Aaron Jones 9, and Leonard Fournette 10. The first things that kind of show off to me, and I'll go ahead and get into the guy that, again, I'm very leery of and the most likely to bust this year. We don't take any, satisfaction in being right about this, but we were both on Derrick Henry last year. He has the last 3 seasons, 303 carries, 378. And then what was mind-boggling was last year, 219 in 8 games.
Yeah, he was really going for it.
I know he's a freak of nature, but there's just a history of guys, once they reach that 300 plateau multiple years in a row, you're in trouble. And you saw it last year. His yards per carry was down even pre-injury. I know he came out gangbusters those first few weeks, but it's just starting to show that he's had so many carries. And again, I would be very leery of taking him 5th, particularly when he's not a big pass catcher. So you're not going to get a lot of points in the passing game anyway from him, whether it's a half point or full point. Yeah. He's the first name that really, jumps off the page to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I have him 6th on mine.
I have him 7th. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's hard to argue too much. I went through the top, 20 or so running backs to see like how many times they got over 100 total yards last couple of years, how often they're getting carries in the red zone. I mean, he was over 100 total yards, 10 of 16 in 2020, and 6 of the 8 games in 2021.
Such a beast.
So that's 2/3 of his games the last 2 years. And then his 2.2 carries plus targets inside the 10-yard line, all the guys I looked at, and that's every running back in the top, I think 30. Only Dalvin Cook was seeing the ball more inside of that. So I think, it's hard to drop him too far. But again, he's hitting that 1,400 carries. That's where he's at now. Again, 1,500 carries tends to be where people drop off. So again, I'm a little bit concerned. And to your point, he also doesn't have that PPR upside. So, and I also don't think the Titans are going to be that great. I think that line is kind of decaying, and they don't have A.J. Brown, which just means more stacked boxes.
So Rocky Kimple, great comment here. He says a new subscriber, and it's a good point that, people say Henry is older and more injury prone due to overuse when he's barely older than C-Mac, and split carries his first few years. And obviously he does not have the injury history that McCaffrey does. But funny, Rocky, you mentioned that because McCaffrey was the next guy that I was going to get into that I'm very leery about picking him, especially last year when, again, in my first ever auction, I spent for him and it hurt. So just to go over mine, and this is going to get the first huge whoa, I know. But I have Jonathan Taylor 1. I have Aaron Jones 2, which I know people are probably like, what are you smoking, Keith? Again, I did full point PPR. I think Aaron Jones is going to have a ton of receptions this year. I think it's easy to see Aaron Jones being the number one targeted passing options in the Aaron Rodgers Packers offense, whatever it ends up being this year. I think the Packers are going to be a little bit more run-based as well, where I think there's both value in him. And I'm sorry, why am I blanking on big boy A.J. Dillon? I have Eckler third, who Eckler is just a fantasy freak. If he stays healthy, he's amazing. I have McCaffrey 4, but again, I don't love it. Najee Harris 5, who, again, we saw last year what he can do. I think whatever you believe in Mitch Trubisky, he can't be worse than the Big Ben that we got last year. So there's a good chance Najee Harris actually has a better season this year. And then I have Cook, Henry, Mixon, DeAndre Swift, and then the other surprise probably for most people is I have Javonte Williams 10. I think Williams has as much upside and potential this year as any running back. Dude is an absolute freak. He just didn't score touchdowns last year. If you look at it in every metric other than that, he was much better than Melvin Gordon. And he's a better pass catcher. And I think the addition of Russell Wilson, there's a chance that the Broncos offense is much better. And Javonte Williams to me is a perfect running back to pair with Russell Wilson and those speedy receivers. Why don't you go over your top 10 list real quick, Joe?
Yeah. All right. So my top 10, I've got, again, obviously Taylor number 1. I have McCaffrey 2. What the guy who wrote in, I was Rocky, right?
Yes.
So I just want to address one thing because I don't think a lot of people necessarily know this, and that's running back touches are not all equal when it comes to wearing a guy down. Now, granted, McCaffrey's obviously much smaller, so if you want to just bank on Derrick Henry being a superhuman and McCaffrey looking more like a reasonable person, and
looks like me and you, Joe.
Yeah, well, not quite. Definitely
relatively.
But yeah, receptions don't have the same wear and tear. It's why we talk about wide receivers and we say like, oh, they're less likely to get hurt. So the fact that McCaffrey had 400 touches in 2019, 116 of those are receptions. He's taking less of a beating.
Outrageous.
You know, he's had one season in his career where he topped 220 carries. So, you know, again, if you want to bet on the body, that's fine. But from an actual wear and tear standpoint of just how they've been used in football games, that's where, to me, there's a difference in why I feel better about having McCaffrey 2. And then also, again, even in half point, if McCaffrey's healthy and gets 100 receptions, that's 50 points, and you're getting, 15.
I think it's fair to say if he's healthy, he will get 100 receptions, right?
Considering the team he's on and the lack of competent quarterback play.
Extra game, too.
Yeah, that's true. I'm forgetting always that there's 17 games now. So if he's healthy for all 17, it's guaranteed. 3, Austin Eckler. Again, similar thing. He's going to rack up receptions. I also think that's potentially the best offense in the NFL. So I'm all in on Chargers this year. Number 4, Dalvin Cook. I just think it's weird how he's dropped on some lists. I know FF had him, what did you say, 5th? He's another guy where last 2 years, granted he's missed a couple games each year, over 60% of the time he's getting you over 100 yards. And then again, leading the league in touches inside the 10-yard line over those 2 years. So again, best ball is all about maximizing your points in a given week. If you're breaking 100 yards and getting a bunch of touches inside the 10, great chance that you're going to score a lot of points. So after Cook, I've got Najee Harris. That's, all in volume. He touched the ball an incredible amount last year. And since he's only a rookie, I'm not worried about the wear and tear yet. Derrick Henry 6th, Joe Mixon 7th. This is going to be the best line I think he's had in his career. They really revamped that Bengals line. And they're going to be in the red zone a lot because that offense is going to be good. I just reevaluated just over the last hour after we talked. I'm moving your Georgia boy DeAndre Swift up to 8. I just think, again, the Lions actually have a really underrated offensive line. I think
they're going to be sneaky good just in general.
Yeah, I mean, Goff's not incompetent. He may not excite anyone, but he's going to throw to Swift. 9, I've got Fournette, which I know you're a little lower on Fournette, and historically I generally am too. But again, I think That's an offense that's going to move the ball. So if you get Fournette in the red zone, I'm feeling good. Ronald Jones is gone, although my boy Rashad White has joined the team, so I'm excited about him. And then number 10, I've got Javonte Williams, who I just think I think he could be like number 2 or 3. If the whole problem is Melvin Gordon came back. I was hyped. Yep. I would have had him top 5, no doubt, if Melvin Gordon's not there. But I'm excited to see that Packers system move over to Denver and see what he can do in that role. I mean, led the league in broken tackles last year. So
he put up a lot of points, in fairness, with him and Gordon both playing down the stretch. So there's that. But he just got to score. If he scored, touchdowns at a normal rate the second half, he would have been a top 5 running back the last 8 weeks. Rocky just asked a good point about a terrible offense. If it's a pass catching back, I think it only helps you. And this is what I always tell people in fantasy. I look for bad teams, particularly in later picks, or if I'm deciding between 2 players, because they're going to be down and they're going to be throwing a lot. And that's only going to help them. And I'm sure we've all seen the Carolina game where McCaffrey will have 10 carries for 45 yards at the half. And then he catches, they're down, say, 14 points going in the half. Then he catches 11 balls for 90 yards just in the second half, which has 20 points or, 14 and a half points in a half-point PPR or full-point PPR. So, absolutely, I'm always looking for guys that are in, bad situations when I'm looking at receivers and running backs in PPR situation. And we will definitely get into that in detail in DraftKings when we start doing the daily fantasy stuff. We always have a low tier guy where it's like, okay, this team's going to be down several touchdowns and slinging in the second half. Same deal for the quarterback. So let's go over.
Just real quick.
Ahead, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, I do wish that there was anyone besides DJ Moore I felt confident in on that offense, just to ensure that they'd move the ball more. But again, that's one of the reasons why I still feel good about McCaffrey overall versus I'm fading Henry a little bit, because I don't expect either of those teams to be good. Obviously, I expect the Panthers to be worse. But Henry does not benefit if his team is worse.
Right.
That just hurts him more. Yep. Whereas McCaffrey, like you said, he could get 120 receptions in part because they're going to be double teaming DJ Moore. No one's going to be open. So they'll dump it off to him. So, yeah, that would be why I think we're still high on McCaffrey.
All right, before we get to the next group of guys, who is your running back with the highest upside? Because that's probably going to come in this next range of that, 10 to 11 to 25 range.
I mean, the guy I just touched on, Javonte Williams, I think he could absolutely be up there. I think he could have a Jonathan Taylor-like year 2, especially if Melvin Gordon were to go down. But the other guy I got to bring up, because I think, we're all at this point, maybe we've given up, but Saquon Barkley.
Yep.
I mean, the offensive line, assuming Evan Neal is what he's supposed to be, it's going to be the best offensive line Saquon's ever run behind in the NFL. And that's a low bar. Another low bar is it's going to be the best offensive coaching that he's had in the NFL. And I mean, he was extremely productive in those first 2 seasons. And the other thing last year is, he's coming off the injury. I know he said in practices lately that, he just feels way more confident than he did last year. And I do expect this offense to actually utilize him as a receiver in ways that aren't just run to the flats. So,
and hopefully move the ball enough, right, that it's not 8 defenders on Saquon Barkley on every play. Right.
Yeah, I think they're going to use him, Tony, and Wan'Dale Robinson in some very interesting ways. We'll find out if it works, but I mean, he's a guy, he could end up being, in the late teens among running backs, and he could easily finish top 5 if he can return to those first 2 years. So I think those are the 2 guys I look at when you're looking at guys at the tail end of the top 10 or even into the teens that could easily end up. Number 1 running back. I wouldn't be shocked by either of those guys if things break right.
All right, I'm going to give you 3 names real quickly. The first one should not surprise anybody who followed our draft prep. It's Breece Hall for the Jets. He's a stud. His measurables were there with Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Adrian Peterson. There's been a very small group of running backs that have graded that off the charts athletically. And then, oh, by the way, he had unbelievable production in college. He's a good pass catching back. We saw last year that Zach Wilson and the Jets love throwing to running backs. Michael Carter and Tank Johnson, I think, had 2 games where they both had 7 receptions or more in the same game. And I think he's going to be a real difference maker. And the Jets offense, I think, is going to be really good. Their defense is probably going to struggle, but I believe in Elijah Moore. I think Zach Wilson is going to look a lot better this year because, again, the offensive line is going to be better. And, again, Breece Hall just has the chance because of where he's going right now to be a huge upside. The second guy is basically a rookie, and Travis Etienne, who, man, anybody who watched him with Trevor Lawrence at Clemson should understand why it was so devastating to Jaguars front office, coaching, their fans when he went down before that season last year. And, oh, by the way, the Jags have really improved everything around him. Again, better offensive line, more receivers. I don't know what his workload as a runner is going to be, which is the only thing that kind of concerns me about him because people just kind of be writing off James Robinson, who's had 2 very good seasons as a running back. But either way, Etnie's going to have a huge impact catching the ball out of the backfield. And if he ends up being their number 1 ball carrier as well, he has a great chance to also have a big breakout. And then finally, Ezekiel Elliott. And I know a lot of people are down on him. I understand that. But the Cowboys still have a very good offensive line. They still have an explosive offense. And I think he was banged up last year. I don't think Elliott's done just yet. I think it's actually going to help him that the last 2 years he has not had the carries that he had in the previous seasons. And he's been very effective in the red zone his entire career. So if you believe the Cowboys are going to be a good offensive team and he can stay healthy, I think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. And, oh, by the way, it's coming up on Zeke needs a new contract. And he knows he's probably only got one more big contract coming. And it never fails that these guys always ball out when money's on the table. They're like, wait a minute, I got to really get my ass in gear or I'm not going to get paid. So I just think Zeke in that Cowboys offense, I know everybody's really high on Pollard, and I get that, but Zeke's going to get every opportunity to be the number 1 back again in that offense. And he had still some big games, and he's always been a guy, especially in a best ball format, where he will put up these monster games. And I expect that to continue. And I just think he's fallen a little bit too far, and that's why I think he has a high upside.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on with the 2 younger guys you brought up is one of the things I always love to look at during the lead up to any draft is, well, the NFL draft, but also fantasy draft, is Football Outsiders. They have their various projections for a number of positions for rookies. And Breece Hall came in their backcast, so that's their running back thing, at plus 149%. So that's 149. I forget the exact way it works, like 149% better than average. It's their 4th highest projection they have, and one of the top 3 is Ricky Williams. So that's how far back it goes. We're talking about 20 plus years. They're saying this guy, 4th best projection of all time. And the guys he's behind are, again, Ricky Williams, who have had a number of really big years. Saquon Barkley, who first 2 years, awesome. And the number 1 guy all time in the projections was Jonathan Taylor, which is why in my keeper league, I have Jonathan Taylor because I pay attention to that. So he had a massive score. I feel really good about him. The year before, the guy who had the highest projection was Travis Etienne, the Jaguars. Obviously, we didn't get to see him because he got hurt. But these are 2 guys where you're looking, it's not, the analytics, if you go back and just read what scouts were saying about either of these guys, these are difference makers. As far as Zeke Elliott goes, we are on opposite sides, and Godspeed to anyone who gives any running back a big 3rd contract. Like,
right.
If maybe Dave Gettleman just hijacks a team and decides to do that, but I hope no one else is willing to do. Well, I hope the Cowboys do it, obviously, but
right.
I think that's crazy. Which one are we going to next? Because if we're going to running backs, we're going to fade. Then I'll just go ahead and give my
do it. Let's go into it. Sure.
Again, 1,500 carries, that's when you start to see the real drop off. And guess who's over 1,500 carries in his career now?
You're going to shit on my Ezekiel Elliott. I know you are, Joe. Go ahead.
I just think he's in year 7 now, I believe. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, year 7. Mm-hmm. There's an article you can look up on PFF. It's about the myths and the realities of when running backs wear down. And if you look at run yards over expected, so based on how many guys are in the box, what the, if it's first and goal, you're not going to get a lot of yards. So it's taking all that stuff into account. Running backs on average are above average compared to the expected amount of rushing yards their first 4 years of the career. After year 6, it's below average. This is year 7 for Zeke Elliott. He's, again, 150 carries over that 1,500 rush mark, which is when we usually see guys go downhill. If you look at Football Outsiders DVOA last year, he was the 23rd running back, which is fine in efficiency. Pollard was 4th. So to me, I'm looking at these guys, and I just think at this point, Pollard's going to be the better running back. Although the one reason I'm not 100% all in, fade Zeke no matter what, he's dominated the red zone carries between those two guys throughout their careers. So unless that changes, he should still get a decent amount of touchdowns because I think that Cowboys offense will be good. But I don't think we're going to see anything better than we saw the last couple of years. I think he's just going to be steadily downhill from here. So he's not in my top 20. He's still in the top 25, but I'm fading Zeke.
So the guy that I am fading, it's Leonard Fournette. I don't, and again, it's kind of like with Zeke being a guy that I'm really high on. It's because of where he's going in the draft. It's the same deal with Fournette. Anybody that listens to the quarterback episode knows that I'm down on Brady this year. He's 45. He's returning without Gronk. The Godwin news is not good out of camp. They're talking about him starting on the PUP list. And these things just don't end well. They typically do end end well. And I worry if that offense takes a step back, Fournette could obviously be a part of that. And then the other thing is, Joe, you're really high on the rookie that they drafted. Is out of Arizona State, right?
Yeah, that's how you know I legitimately like this guy. He's an Arizona guy, and I believe in him.
So I worry about that as well. And Fournette has been amazing in Tampa. He is somebody that we rolled with a lot in DK last year because he was underpriced. When you look at where he is going and then the names after him, I would rather have Barkley. I would rather have Chubb. I would rather have Javonte Williams. I would rather have Hall and Etney. I just think that he is overvalued right now. And if Tampa ends up having the kind of season that I think they could, which I think it could be bad, and again, relatively bad. They're still going to be good. They're still going to move the ball. I'm just saying they've been basically the best offense, arguably, in football, the last 2 years, especially in a consistency. When you bring that into factor, because they just seem to score 28 points every single week. I just think if they have that step back, he's not going to be worth the top 10 pick. Let's move into that next range because there's some really interesting guys. Let's start with J.K. Dobbins, who I think people are forgetting how great he was his rookie year. And obviously the huge advantage it is to be a running back in a Lamar Jackson-led offense. Are you high on J.K. Dobbins? Because I'm very high on him.
Yes. I don't think there was a player we were more upset to see go down, at any point in the season probably than J.K.
And if
Dobbins.
you had a Baltimore Ravens uniform on and you were a running back last year, man, it was rough.
Yeah. So
Every single one of them seemed to get hurt.
It was amazing in a terrible way. And that's why Lamar Jackson was, for a while there, on pace to be the first 4,000, 1,000 quarterback in history, which I think is still in play. But
I do too.
Again, going back to his rookie year, going back to DVOA for Football Outsiders, J.K. Dobbins was the most efficient runner in the NFL per their numbers. Now, I don't think those numbers are exact same on PFF, but I know they were also very high on him. I mean, he's really good. He was after Jonathan Taylor, he was my favorite running back in that draft. And that's one that had Swift, that had Akers.
It's a really good class, yeah.
So, I've always been high on him. And again, in that offense that's so run-oriented and where teams can't key on you because Lamar Jackson is there. I love him. I think there's, always, they're not going to give him 350 carries. They have other running backs that are good there. Gus Edwards is still around. But, yeah,
he doesn't
I think
need it, though. That offense with the explosive plays he made, especially down the stretch of his rookie season, you really saw. I mean, he had, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks in a row where he had 12 carries for over 80 yards and at least 8 touchdowns. He scored in 6 straight games.
6 yards per attempt on 134 carries. So that's not a huge sample size. It's not like he did it at 300 carries, but if you're doing that 130 plus carries and you're hitting 6, it's not a fluke either.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
So the next guy, Elijah Mitchell, who we were as mad as we were about Trey Sermon not being the guy at the beginning of the year, because that's what we predicted. We fell in love with Elijah Mitchell. He was constantly underpriced on DraftKings. I know there's some concern because Shanahan has, a little bit of that Belichick in him that you don't ever know who the running back's going to be. But I think Mitchell earned it. He didn't fumble, which is the other big thing, which obviously that's a huge deal when you don't cough up the rock. He was a good pass catcher. And what I loved was he played hurt, like not banged up. He played hurt down the street. I mean, he like broke his finger, right? And there was no chance he was going to play. And then he ended up playing that Monday night. I think, again, the Niners, we know how Shanahan and that offense, they run the ball. It seems like you could throw anybody back there. If he's going to be the back, which it looks like he is, I'm really high on him, and he's another guy that has some huge upside.
Yeah, obviously he was a guy that we very quickly were in on. I think, there's always that, is this guy just the week 1 fluke, yada, yada, yada. I know in all of my season-long leagues, I was immediately like, I'm picking him up because, again, I don't think you should ever question if a guy goes off for Kyle Shanahan, that could just be the guy the entire year. But that's also what scares me. I mean, you go back 2019, it's Raheem Mostert's the guy who's going for 770 yards, leading the team in rushing. The next year, Jeff Wilson is leading the team. Obviously, there were injuries, but a lot of times, there's old saying, you can't lose your spot to injury. We all know it's not true, but it's especially not true if your coach is Kyle Shanahan and you were a 6th round pick. That's what kind of scares me. Is, McCaffrey goes down, he misses 3 weeks, he's back. Obviously, we're not drafting him in the same range, but there's a lot of guys in that range, 15 to 20, 25, where if they go down, they will most likely still be the starter a month later. I don't feel that with Elijah because, Trey Sermon's still lurking. Tyrion Davis-Price, they drafted him. So, and Jeff Wilson is still there. So, that's why, to me, he's in the low 20s for me. I still like him. I think he's a good player, but I just don't have – there's not a safety net there where I think there are for other guys.
I think he was so consistent, though. Those guys you mentioned before, it was a lot of injuries. And, again, he was their offense last year. Jimmy G was not impressive. It was him and Deebo Samuel. And I'm still very high on him. Some guys in this range that I'm leery of. Josh Jacobs. We've talked about the Raiders situation. They basically already told him, you're not coming back next year. We're not going to sign you same deal for Kenyon Drake. That scares me, especially when you draft a running back like they did with Zamir White. I would not be surprised if Zamir White ends up wrangling that starting job at some point. Now, you could make the argument they're just going to run the wheels off with Jacobs, and maybe that's fair. But he was not as productive last year either as he has been in the previous couple of years. One guy I know you're really high on. Why don't we talk about Miles Sanders?
Yeah, Miles Sanders. I just every time I've watched Miles Sanders, for one, this is just eye test stuff. He just looks like a really good running back. Like, you see him making cuts. Every single year, 4.6 yards or better per carry. I mean, for his career now, which is up to 480 carries, 5.1 yards a rush. Like, this is a guy who's explosive. They haven't used him as much as I would have hoped after his rookie year, where he had 50 receptions.
Joe, they had the crowd going nuts every time he would just get a carry. Right. Home crowd, because even they knew, like, why are we not running the ball?
It's been confusing why he hasn't gotten the ball more, honestly, and that's now across 2 different coaching regimes. So that's probably the one reason to be a little worried is he maxed out his rookie year, 179 rushes, although he missed 4 and 5 games the last 2 years. So if he's healthy, I'm hoping to get 200 plus. But yeah. I'm also just a big believer in that team. I think they're the best team in the East. The fact that now you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith's in year 2, which is a potential breakout year for anyone, but especially wide receivers. I think you can't key on the run. And then also Jalen Hurts is there. There's just – and again, going back to Mostert, Trey Lance could be a big help to him, or he could be a big hurt. If Trey Lance is stealing...
You mean Mitchell, right?
Oh, yeah, Mitchell, sorry. But, yeah, when I look at Lance, he could be terrible next year. He could be great, but he could steal... He's a big-bodied guy. He could steal a lot of rushing touchdowns. Obviously, Hurts can steal some touchdowns, but I think we've seen this offense. We feel confident that it'll be good. It'll move the ball. And I think if Miles Sanders is healthy and he gets 240 carries, we'd easily be talking about 1,300 yards just on the ground. So again, he's in my top 20. I think I had him at 19 on my rankings. So I'm a big believer in him as a guy you can get, a few, 4th round or something in that range, and he could be a top 10 running back if things break right. So I really like him. I really like that offense. I'm buying on the Eagles.
And don't you think it's fair to say that when Gainwell and Scott are the guys behind you, I don't think you have to worry about either one of them taking the lead back role. Like, they're both good at what they are, which is kind of change of pace, receiving backs. But if they're going to commit to run the ball, I don't think either one of those 2 guys even have the chance to be the answer. Miles Sanders could be that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the one downside is we've seen those guys come in, and that's why his receptions have not been as high the last 2 years as his rookie year. But again, in December of last year, he had back-to-back games, 120 yards or more. And that was when he got 24 carries. He got 18 carries. So if they feed him, he will produce.
All right, another guy that I'm not sure about. PFF has him 28th. And I understand New England's situation. I know how Belichick, who knows, but Damian Harris has been a very good back his first 2 years in the NFL. And I didn't see it from Stevenson last year. I don't see him. Like, I think Stevenson can be, again, that change of pace, explosive back, but I didn't see anything that said Damian Harris is going to be unseated as the lead back in that offense. And he's another guy that if he just scores a few more touchdowns, which sometimes that's luck, sometimes that's how good the offense is, whatever you want to call it, he's going to be way over the 28th running back drafted, which is where he's at right now in PFF. And with Mac Jones, I don't see New England slinging it around. They're still going to be run heavy, and he's going to have a ton of opportunities.
Yeah, another interesting thing is, how does McDaniels leaving change the offense? And I think you could argue that for good or ill. I'm probably more pessimistic on the offense as a whole because he's gone, especially because they seem to be leaning towards Matt Patricia leading the offense, which
means Belichick is leading the offense, right?
Yeah. But also, to your Josh Jacobs point too, if McDaniels is the guy running things now, are we going to see more of a timeshare? Is it going to be week to week? You don't know. Like, how much of that was McDaniels? How much was Belichick? We'll kind of find out this year. Maybe my general vibe is it's probably both, which is more of an anti-Jacobs thing than a pro-Harris thing. But I'm with you.
It's a master-apprentice thing, right? That, the master believes one way and then the apprentice kind of goes the same way.
Harris is a red zone. They loved him in the red zone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had, again, targets plus carries in the red zone last year, 30. And that was tied for third in the league last year. So as long as they're getting it there, he's going to be the guy most likely to score a touchdown every time.
All right, the 30 to 40 range. I'm going to go through these from PFF. And again, our rankings, and they will be up on the website, so you can check out both me and Joe's. Just please make sure you know that mine are full point, Joe's are half point. So they have Kareem Hunt at 30, Chase Edmonds in Miami 31, Tony Pollard, who we talked about in Dallas 32, Devin Singletary, Buffalo 33, Melvin Gordon, we discussed 34th, Cordell Patterson 35th, James Cook, my boy, in Buffalo, 36. Rashad Penny, 37th in Seattle. Stevenson, who we just mentioned, in New England, 38th. Michael Carter, who is obviously now going to be behind Breece Hall, 39th. And Madison, who backs up our boy Dalvin Cook. In that list, give me one or two guys you really like.
Ooh, Chase Edmonds is a really interesting one to me. I don't know that I'm all in, but I do know Miami is definitely going to run the ball. I think there's no question there. Mike McDaniels, he was the run game coordinator last year for San Francisco. He's been the guy who's been following Shanahan around at each stop that he's had, going back to the Cleveland days. So he's committed to running the ball, and he's going to do it in inventive ways. And you and I both really liked Chase Edmonds when he had opportunities last year in Arizona. He's not a guy who's going to see 20 carries a game. He's diminutive. And Mostert, who obviously is familiar with the system, he's there. So there's some competition, but
he's best ball. Do you think you should take several Miami backs because we both believe, obviously, with that pedigree, they're going to run the ball. It's probably not a bad idea to try to grab a couple of them because we don't know who's going to be the person. And you're not going to spend a lot of capital.
Yes, that's definitely a team where I'm looking. There's no clear cut. This guy's at the top all season. I can trust him. So there's risk there. But yeah, in those middle rounds, there could be a lot of value. Again, like an Elijah Mitchell type season could come out of that. So Miami is definitely a team to keep your eye on. Any
other guys on that list you really like?
I mean, Kareem Hunt's an injury away from being a top 10 running back every week.
Yep.
So but we've seen him when he's been a lead, he produces. And we're talking about coaches that want to run the ball and are good at scheming it up. Kevin Stefanski knows what he's doing there. So
if Watson plays too, it'll only help, right? Because he's the pass catching back.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think he's going to get 10 plus carries every week while Chubb is healthy, and it goes to 20 if Chubb's not. So I'm definitely in on him, even if I don't love him for off the field reasons. But.
So I'm going to mention Cordell Patterson here. Had an unbelievable season. Yeah. Arthur Smith proved he knows how to use a weapon like Cordell Patterson. I think the Falcons' offense is going to be better. And again, I'm huge on Matt Ryan, but I just think giving Arthur Smith not just one running or quarterback, but two quarterbacks that can actually move and run. I think the Falcons' offense is going to be sneaky good, and they'll find a way to use Patterson. And if he's a true lead back, which, again, all signs point that he will be the lead back, I like that when you have the weapons that they do now at receiver and obviously a more running quarterback. You all know my love of James Cook. I think you should grab him up. That is, again, you can read articles, listen to previous podcasts. The other guy, again, is Melvin Gordon. As much as I'm all over Javonte Williams, if he falls, which I think he will in a lot of drafts, he's going to get the rock. He's going to get production. He was the guy in the goal line. He got a lot of the goal line carries. So I think Gordon's one of those guys that as long as it's a good place to pick him, and I mean in a sense that it's good value for you, maybe he slops into that, running back 41, 42, I would not hesitate in a heartbeat to pick him up because good offense. And we know Gordon is not going to be asked to do too much, which for a guy his age and with his skill set, that's actually, I think, a good thing. And obviously he can score some touchdowns. Moving on to the 40 to 50 real quick. We got 41, Ronald Jones, who's now in Kansas City. That's interesting in itself.
Yeah.
My boy Damian Pierce in Houston, I'm going to stop right here and just say he is going to be the starting running back week 1. He's the 42nd running back. Oh, yeah. Come on, Joe. Do you really think Marlon Mack?
I liked Marlon Mack when he was healthy.
He played in 2 years. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Mack will get every opportunity.
Pierce will lead the team in carries. I just don't know if he'll be leading the team week 1. That would be my only thing. But yeah, I
That's
think
fair.
he's
No,
obviously
he's the 42nd back though. You can get a starting
Yeah.
running back
Yeah, I feel good about
late. You should be grabbing him. White, who we mentioned for Tampa Bay, the rookie, he looks really good. Henderson Jr. is another guy that we didn't really touch on. Cam Akers. I think Cam's got a lot of upside, but again, I worry about the injuries. Henderson proved last year what he can do in that offense. Again, a lot of value at 44th. Spiller for the Chargers is one of the guys I like the least out of this group. I just think that Eckler has, there wasn't a lot of room for other carries last year. So if Eckler's healthy, right, like it's going to be a similar situation.
True. I just think the handcuff situation there is
that's fair. No, I agree with you there.
I
James
don't think
Robinson.
Josh Kelly is going to be taking too
No,
much risk
not at all.
if that happens. So
two guys in this list that I do want to get to real quick. James Robinson. I know we again talked about Etney, how great he is. Robinson's been fantastic. He's the 47th back. I don't know what the timeshare is going to be. I don't know what they're going to split, but he's proven he can handle it. Say Etney has more injury concerns. Robinson's been very sturdy. I love him. And then the other guy is Herbert for Chicago, who I'm down on Montgomery this year. I just think, again, he's reaching that age that we talked about with Elliott. Herbert was really good last year. I believe in Justin Fields. I think the Bears' offense is going to be better this year. And I would not be shocked if Herbert is one of those guys in this range could end up a top 20 running back for the season if things go the right way. We're saying Montgomery gets hurt or he just earns the job.
Yeah, I still like David Montgomery. I don't think he's quite at the range where he's definitely going to be tailing off here. But again, if Montgomery goes down, we saw what Herbert could do last year, and we liked it a lot. So he's another guy. Again, when you're getting into this range, you're looking for guys who either are in backfields that are very much in flux, like we just discussed Miami, or even, Cook in Buffalo. I don't think Singletary's that safe as the lead back in that offense. But you're either looking for that or you're looking for this guy. If the lead running back goes down, he's in a productive offense, and he will be getting the vast majority of the carries and preferably the targets as well. And I think Herbert is one of those guys. So I really like him as well.
All right, sleepers. You got any sleepers or handcuffs that you think we definitely let's finish there?
I mean, again, going back to you never know what'll happen in San Francisco. Darian Davis Price. 1,000-yard back at LSU last year, ran a 4.48 at over 210 pounds. So he's not a guy where you're worried about durability. And they drafted him in the 3rd round. If you're drafting
capital, yeah,
a running back in the 3rd, I mean, most running backs now, if they're very top end, they're going in the 2nd round because it's rare to go in the 1st. So 3rd round running backs are still running backs you really value. So I think it's interesting that he went there. Obviously, Trey Sermon proved last year it's not a guarantee, but I look at him and I kind of go, if Mitchell goes down, he could take the job, and potentially that doesn't even have to happen because if he just goes off for a week when he gets his carries, Shanahan has proven he's not the most loyal guy. So I look at him and he's the guy you could potentially get. He could be the 60th running back drafted. Mm-hmm. So I think when you're in that range, I don't think there's anyone who has the upside that he has.
Any other guys? We mentioned Zamir White.
Did we? Yeah, I like Zamir White. I can't remember. Did you list Tyler Algier at all?
No.
In that?
Well, I mean, he's. I have him in the top 45 of my backs. I think I have him around 43rd or 42nd. He definitely is somebody that could, end up taking over that backfield. I'm actually really interested to see what the offense is next year because we don't know with Mariota or if it's Ripper.
Yeah, I expect Tyler Algier to lead the Falcons in carries.
And if that's the case, then he's very undervalued.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, over 90 grade for PFF the last 2 years he was in college, and he was top 5 in this running back class in yards after contact. So this is a guy who can bruise. And Arthur Smith, I mean, I guess we're basing it off of Derrick Henry, but I think he likes his bruisers.
Yeah. James White, I need to mention him again. Half point, full point, either way. He missed a lot of games last year. Mac Jones is going to complete a lot of passes to him. And to me,
Yeah.
these are the kind of guys that you have to have in a best ball team because they're going to get consistency even, say, they have 5 catches for, 40 yards. That's, 9 points in a full point PPR. It's 7.5 point or 7.5. And it's huge because you're going to have weeks that your running back, if they don't score a touchdown and they don't, catch passes out of the backfield, you can have, 20 carries for 30 yards. You get 3 points. If they fumble, you get 1. So you're going to look for those kind of guys. The other is, we talked about New England. Pierre Strong Jr. to me is actually the guy that I would not be shocked if he ends up stealing some of Damian Harris. We kind of saw their frustration last year with Stevenson. It's why he didn't get to play too much. We know how Belichick's just one of those guys. He either trusts a running back or he doesn't. So I just pay attention to Pierre Strong because he's got a clean slate. And then the other guys, McKinnon and KC. I know everybody loves Ronald Jones, but don't forget McKinnon was actually the running back down the stretch that was, the number 1 back, and he is right now 80th. So when you can get a guy in that range on arguably one of the best offenses in football that you would think is going to run the ball a little bit more without Tyreek Hill being there, he's another guy. Any other ones that you want to get in before we get out of here?
I just want to say Pierre Strong. 4.37 40. So, yeah, I think he's a good late dart. I like that. As far as the pass catchers go, I will say in best ball. I could be wrong. This is the first time I've really dug into best ball, but to me, I drop those guys a little more than I would in a normal season-long league, just because if it's a guy who's just a pure pass catcher for the most part, like Nyheim Hines is not going to get 15 plus carries. Maybe he gets it 1 week. Like it's just not going to happen.
That's if they're up 3-4 touchdowns.
So if I've got some of these guys who are, handcuffs or rookies who I think will have roles and potentially will grow as the year goes on, I might bump them ahead of a Hines, James White, McKissick, because I just think in best ball, you got to play the upside. But yeah, at a certain point, it helps to have guys who set a floor for you, just in case.
Especially if you're not drafting these guys early and you're going for the later round, I think you have to have some guys that are going to score consistent points, and the pass catching backs are going to give you that. Because if you don't take a running back first 5-6 rounds, you got to have at least 1 or 2 guys on your team that each week they're going to get 5 to 8 points.
Yeah, it would be good to balance, I think, to take your upside shot and then balance it out with a guy who can give you 10 points every week.
All right, again, we're going to be back next week to discuss wide receivers and tight ends, and then we're going to do mock drafts in 2 weeks, which we're very excited about, obviously. I do want to plug, though, the Fantasy and Frames website. If you're a fan of fantasy football, and I'm not just saying that because I now am a part of this, it's unbelievable work. There are so many smart guys who are writing in-depth player profiles, strategies, etc. It's nirvana if you're like me and you love fantasy football. It's amazing work. Also, please check out the Fantasy and Frames Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and the podcast network, which again has Dynasty Podcast, Fantasy Redraft, you name it. They've got them all. It's, again, just high quality content, which is, for me, what I'm looking for. Anybody can be splashy and loud. I'm looking for stats, figures, and well thought out opinions, which we have tons of on Fantasy and Frames. Joe, you got anything you want to plug real quick?
Just sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code FRAMES. And they'll match you 100% on your first deposit up to $100. So get in on that.
Absolutely. And we're so excited for Daily Fantasy. For those that have not played it before this year, we're going to get you into it. We're going to win some money. We're going to have some fun. But for Keith Fleming and Joe Matz, this is the Daily Fix podcast on the Fantasy and Frames Podcast Network. We will see you guys soon.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Another baby.